Now, if you're preparing your condominium for sale, one of the things that you're going to see after you list your property, hopefully, is this residential purchase contract for resale condominium property, or your offer, or your purchase contract if you accept one. Now, on this contract, 99% of the time, you're going to find that they're going to ask for the condominium documents, and they'll have this 8 in conditions, in 8.1 condominium documents condition. First thing I want to point out is this particular part of this condition, and it says if the seller fails or refuses to deliver the documents by the agreed time, the buyer may obtain the documents through other sources. All reasonable costs incurred by the buyer to obtain the documents, including solicitor, client, legal fees, and disbursements, will be paid by the seller. The buyer may set off these costs against the purchase price at the completion day, and the buyer will have no other remedy against the seller for failing to or refusing to deliver the documents. So what happens if you don't have your documents ready? In most cases, they'll extend the conditions, but the buyer may do a couple of things. They may opt out of purchasing the property entirely because they can't get documents, or they may go ahead, waive their conditions, and then get the documents at their costs. This rarely happens. If they do that, they're going to charge you with whatever cost they incurred plus more. So you want to get your documents, I'm stressing here, you want to get your documents ready beforehand. Now, second thing here is the documents will be provided before 9 p.m. on whatever date that they suggest. Now, generally it's about 2 or 3 days from the date that the purchase or the offer is accepted, okay, so that you can get the documents together. Now, some of the companies, condominium management companies, make money by selling documents. So what they'll do is if you need your documents in 3 days, often they'll charge you double what the cost would normally be. For example, some of the documents that you're going to have in this particular list up here are going to be $100 for the document, and they'll charge you $200 for the document to get it in 3 days. That's why we're talking about this right now. So they'll give you a couple days to get the documents, and then they'll have the contract is subject to the buyer's satisfaction with the documents, which means they can opt out of the contract or walk away from the deal if they don't like the way the documents are reviewed. They're going to take them, most times they're going to take your documents, the completed documents, to a condominium review company that explains to them in a professional manner what everything means and what the status is of the condo board, the reserve fund, all those types of things, and the buyer is going to make the decision upon a professional review. Professionals will not review the documents unless they have all of them at the time and the contract. At least every one of the ones I've run into will not review incomplete documents. So if there's one thing missing from the list, they will say, well, we'll have to put back our appointment. And generally speaking, the condominium review companies don't have an unlimited number of appointments. That means that if you don't have your documents together and you pass the 3 days, they can't make an appointment. And most conditions are for all of these things about 8 days. That means that if they don't get 4 or 5 days to review the documents, or at least to make an appointment upon completing the documents, there's this very, very tight window for the condominium review companies to have a look at your documents. I prefer with my clients not to have any more than about 8 days total on conditions. Otherwise, we could be missing out on other potential buyers. And the potential buyer that's looking at this particular contract, the one that you're working with, they may opt out based on condominium documents. So important that you have your documents together just in case the first buyer who writes an offer that you accept, if they opt out of the contract, that you're not losing too much time, or if they say fail to get their financing, you're not losing too much time in that event. Okay, so let's go back now and look at your list again of documents that are required. We're going to go through each one of these documents, and I'm going to show you what they look like so that when you're going through your documents that you have, you can make a list for yourself of what you need to get from your condominium management company. So the first one is a copy of the registered condominium plan. This should have been something you had when you purchased the property. Most times your condo plan will look something like this. It's going to say the Bearland Condominium Registered Plan, the plan number, and then it's also going to show the legend here And what this legend is, it shows the buyer exactly which unit number it is and what the unit factor is, what part of the contributions that the unit is going to pay for relative to the square footage and the size. And this is not the unit number that's on your door. This is not that number. This is the number that would be on title. This is a multiple page document. It'll look like a survey, and it'll have if you notice here, as you go down, it'll have the unit factor schedules for the different units. It'll show kind of the layout, and it'll show in detail the parking plan, so where the parking spot is and those things. So several pages to this document, possibly, maybe one, maybe two, but this is an important document. This can be available from land titles. So land titles will have this if you don't have it. You have to call them and get using your title, get that information. You can order the plan, and they can usually even get that to you online. Your condominium management company may have this as well. Next thing we're looking for is a copy of the current bylaws of the corporation. Now, this is something you should have got when you bought the property as well. This outlines all of the permissions that you're given. Okay, here's what the front page may look like, and it is definitely a legal document. This is a change to the bylaws that was included in the total bylaws that was signed off on. It's this one here is for point of view, Condo Fish Creek, point of view bylaws of the owners. This outlines everything that's. It's usually a pretty big document. We're talking could be as many as 50 pages, could be as many as 5. Definitions of headings, corporate seal, all things about the corporation and how the condo corporation acts, and all the laws of the corporation, and the rules of the owners, duties and powers of the corporation goes through that. But it does get into some serious details about in the event of damage of destruction or unit, or if there's a water leak, insurance, what they're going to carry for insurance. These are all the bylaws of the corporation, and this is where you'd find requirements such as owners' obligations, rights, such as pet restrictions, things like that. And this one says right in the condominium documents that they're not allowed to keep or allow any animal, livestock, fowl, or pet of any kind other than birds, fish, or small animals restrained at all times inside the unit. At any time to be in this unit or in the common property without specific approval in writing from the board. So what they're saying is that if you want to have a dog, you have to have a permit, or you have to have permission. All dogs approved must be hand leashed and kept under control at all times. So in this particular case, with this particular condo, and that's why I say this particular one, this isn't the rule for every one of them, but that is the rule for this one, is that the purchaser is going to want to write a condition in it says that if they have a dog, that it's approved by the board before they can go forward. Next on our list is they're looking for a copy of the most recent financial statements of the corporation, including the most recent year-end and month-end statements. This is something you're probably going to have to order, as they don't automatically mail them to you. You'd have to order them from the management company. Some companies actually do mail them out, some of the management companies, and if you attended the meeting, they might have handed them out at the meeting. They charge you for these documents, so if you go to the meetings and they pass them around, my suggestion to you is keep a copy, or make a copy at that time so you don't get charged for these documents later. And here's a sample of one. It says balance sheet specific to Fish Creek Point, May 12th, and it just goes over basically it's going over the reserves that they have in the bank account, those types of things, operating account, that's what you're going to see on that document, but it's the legal name for it. It's going to say balance sheet or financial statement of affairs. Now, you may not know if you actually have this particular document, so you may have to call the management company to see if you've got documents, to see if you have the latest one. Now, if you've got one that's a year older than your date, if you pass that year, they do these once a year. So if you've got an older one and you pass that calendar date this year, you know that you need to get another one. Next is a copy of the current budget of the corporation. Some of these documents, here's a copy of a budget. It doesn't even look like it could be the budget, but it says right in here, please find your attached copy. So the header of this particular, they had a meeting and they wrote this letter in advance of this, and this is what it looks like. This operating budget that tells them what they're going to spend the money on the next year, what they expect the revenue is going to be, and that's their approved budget. And they come up with one of these every year. So if you, most times every year, so if you have an outdated budget, it will not be sufficient for them to review the documents, and it may be several pages. And this is what a budget looks like. Okay, but it'll say somewhere that it's the budget on it, but sometimes it's not that obvious. Okay, next up, a statement setting out the amount of monthly contribution, condominium fee, and the basis on which that amount was determined. Okay, what that's going to be is this. It's usually located within the budget, and you'll see here that there's a fee schedule right here, approved fee schedule. It says unit number and the unit factors associated with the totally monthly amount, and sets out the fees for every unit, usually within the budget. Next up, a copy of the most recent available minutes from the annual general meeting. So these come in every year, there's one done. So if your AGM, and it could be different times of the year because it's a corporation, may not be on the calendar, but January 1st as you might expect. And here's what it'll look like. It'll say at the top, minutes of the annual general meeting. If you've got any in your files or information, look at the date that was put on it. And one of the things you can remember, they don't put out these things if they have the annual general meeting. Sometimes they don't put these out for a couple of weeks. Look at the date that they put on the last one that you have, and if your calendar since then, if it's been a year or 2 years since you've purchased your property or longer, then you'll see that you don't have the meetings you need. So you'll have to have the last one. Okay, next up, a copy of the minutes of the meetings of the board of directors of the corporation for the past 12 months. Okay, now it depends on the condominium corporation that you have. Sometimes there's not very many meetings. Some of the condominiums, especially a small one, if it's a 4-unit complex, may not have any meetings. But if it's a large apartment condo complex, they'll have meetings 3 or 4 or more. So if you have 3 meetings or 4 meetings, it's important to every one of them in the last 12 months. And here's what they look. Now, if you've been to the meetings, it would be important to get a copy of these, as you'll be charged for them if you order. Here's a copy of a meeting. It says minutes of the directors of the PCM held in April. So it's minutes of a meeting. It talks about the financial budget. That's the items that they talk about in the meeting could be anything from drainage issues, parkade cleaning they're talking about here. Here's another one, Fish Creek Point, minutes of the meeting. So you're going to have to call the management company and find out how many meetings there was in the past 12 calendar months, and from the date of your purchase, and see if they've got how many meetings there was and how many you have. Next, a copy of the current insurance certificate. Now this isn't your insurance for your unit, your contents of the unit. This is the condominium's insurance for the grounds, for the exterior of the common area of the building. It may look like this: certificate of liability insurance, and talks about you'd have that, the condominium. Now each year usually there's a new one, or there's an effective date as when. So this one was actually just 1 year. Here's another one for Fish Creek. A copy of a lease agreement or exclusive use agreement with respect to the property or portion of the common property, including a parking stall or a storage space. So this is something that may apply. The other thing they may be looking for is the occupancy letter, and it basically says that please be advised, as far as we're aware, there's 3 owner occupied units and 11 commercial units. This may say that there's 3 rented units. So that would be on the disclosure document. That would be with the management company as well. So if you've got an agreement with the condo board to have a storage space or anything like that, you would have to include that agreement. This is not applicable in all cases, unless the condo is not managed, and most are. So for example, if condos can be managed by the owners, And if it's a small one like a 4-unit complex, it'll likely have no management agreement because probably it'll just have a president. But if it has 10 condominiums or more and there's a management company that's collecting the fees, there's a management agreement in place, very likely. That management agreement, the condo review companies want a copy of that. Here's what it'll look like. Copy of the management agreement, effective date. This is for Fish Creek. Next up, a copy of any recreational agreement. Now, that's not very common, so wouldn't look too hard for that. That would be an agreement for a pool or something along the lines. I've never run into one of those, so it's very uncommon. Second to that, a homeowner association fee. Now, most times this would apply to a bare land condominium where it looks like it's a residential property. They may also have a homeowners association fee, which is an area fee. That is an annual fee, not a monthly fee. Apartment condominiums don't often have these. Neither do small condominiums. Sometimes in some of the older areas. Next, statements setting out out structural deficiencies that the corporation has knowledge of at the time of request. This is going to be on a disclosure document, this particular one here. And any of the buildings are included in the condominium plan. So here's what a disclosure statement looks like. And you'll see it says disclosure statement. And it discloses things like whether there's any defects in the property, current contributions assessment determined by the owner, unit are 366. So if there was a levy or a charge against a unit or any units, no court has granted or issued an order concerning the condominium, nor is there any unsatisfied judgments. We have no knowledge of any legal actions. There's currently no special assessment. These are all the things that now this particular document has to be obtained at the time of the offer. You can't have this one that's 6 months old. It has to be actually in tune with the contract because things could change daily, and it's a very important document. Next up is a statement setting out the amount of capital replacement fund. This is called a reserve fund study. A copy of the most recent reserve fund report and copy of the most recent reserve fund plan. This is all contained within one document. Here's an example of one. Here it says reserve fund study. These are completed every 5 years. Okay, so and they're by law, they have to be completed. And what they outline is the structural. They do a structural assessment. They assess how much is going to be needed and required to repair and keep the building in good maintenance in the next 5 years. What's going to come up, what the how much they need to add to the budget. This is one of the most important documents. And you would have had one. So if you've got one that's 3 years old, that's fine. If it's 6 years old, that's not fine. It needs to be the most current one. The particulars of any post-tension cables located anywhere within the property. Now, there'll be a report, and it would probably be located within the reserve fund study if you had post-tension cables. These are concrete buildings only, and these are buildings that are older buildings. They're not doing post-tension as much anymore. So if they rusted or there were some problems with post-tension cables, huge money to repair. A statement setting out the amount of any contributions due and payable in respect to the unit. So that would be contained within the disclosure document, possibly if there was, and they're going to get that in the form of an estoppel certificate, which is not needed at the time of a review. Estoppel certificates are needed at the time of title transfer. The particulars of any action commenced against the corporation and served on the corporation. This again will be the disclosure document that we had mentioned earlier. So if there's anything, if there is if they outline in the disclosure document that there's a judgment or there's a court case against the corporation, the condominium corporation, not the management company, the corporation, that they would have to disclose that and would have to have any information regarding that. The particulars of any unsatisfied judgment, again, that would be on the disclosure document. The particulars of any written demand made on the corporation excess of $5,000 if not met may result in action. Again, this is on that disclosure document. And here's another example of a disclosure document, and it looks like it shows the monthly condominium fees of that unit. And so this is a reserve fund study. It talks about the amount of reserve funds. The best one is no post-tension cables in the property. That's something that they would put in the disclosure, and no actions, and all of those issues are on this disclosure document. Now, if you've been attending meetings and you've been getting your documents, sometimes you get them in the mail, you should have most of these documents. Sometimes they don't give you any of this information unless you actually go to the condominium meetings or the AGM. They would have the reserve. They would actually have a lot of these things available at the annual general meeting, and then the meetings you could get minutes at each meeting if you were there. So important to keep track of these meetings when they have them, otherwise the management company will charge you for them. The other thing is that the first place to call is the management company. If you've got your management agreement, you'll know who that is, and it should have their phone number on it that you can call and find out where you can get all these documents. Another great resource to get these documents is from a neighbor. So if you happen to meet someone that either if you know a neighbor who sold recently, they may have all their documents in order, or someone who purchased recently would also have a lot of the documents. But if you also know the president of your condo association, that would be a useful resource as well. And the numbers and phone numbers should be contained within within your documents. If you know that person, they would have all the documents, and maybe you can sidestep the management company and get the documents for free. That's what I suggest. Is these three ways are the best ways to get them faster and with less money, less hassle.